Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It's great for a change to talk about positive developments to Ukraine, isn't it? In the last video, we talked extensively about the bill for Ukrainian support that comes to the House floor soon at that moment of recording. And I was saying to you that I was optimistic that it will pass because I believe that there is a majority bipartisan support for that bill. And I always underlined for you that the only prevention of democracy that we were witnessing is not letting a simple up or down vote for that bill. And it was essentially an anti-democratic procedure of preventing help for the Ukraine. But finally, the situation changed and that bill hit the floor, and with all of the bells and whistles of people talking about how controversial this bill is, how there is a big question whether it passes or not, we end up with over 73% of the representatives of the House passing in favor of supporting this defense bill. To put it into perspective, a 73% pass is not just overwhelming, it's not just constitutionally overwhelming in a lot of countries, it's an absolute crusher. It's something that demolishes any kind of doubts of resistance in any other democracies. It's absolutely glorious. The only thing you might notice here is the 112 people that voted no for this bill, and a lot of the people that were voted no are obviously pro-Russian shills, and one way or another, or they deluded, or they're stupid, or whatever the reasons there are, they want for Russia to win, they want for Ukraine to lose, and those are the same people that are leaving comments under my videos. Fuck you. That's what you say, because I told you 73% or more representatives, and I'm pretty sure that is reflective of the US society as well. But this bill is great. We talked about all of the upsides, downsides previous video. We also reacted live to the video passing. And I want to say one very specific thing. The way that this bill passed, the reason this bill passed, the most importantly, is because of you. Very often I talked about that we need to keep going. You need to keep writing, calling your direct representative. And because we don't have the instant feedback, we think that it is useless. It is not useless. Look at this. As soon as there was a chance, as soon as that, even talking about the accumulated pressure, all the accumulated pressure that we developed for this, I'm not saying me, but people that are mostly in US specifically, this is your credit, so please take it. All the credit, all the shit that you had to endure, it was worth it. It worked. It freaking worked. So thank you. Thank you so much for not giving up on Ukraine. Thank you for being active. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. And thank you for letting your politicians know. We see it now shows. Absolutely incredible. And talking about absolutely incredible things, I find it absolutely incredible that right now all of these 112%, that 112 people, representatives from the 27% that want Putin to win in Ukraine, the shells, they are now complaining how much aid Ukraine is getting. Oh my God, we're sending 60 billion in aid to Ukraine. But what about next time? Will it passes or not? Again, guys, 73% support. Incredible bipartisan support. Whoever is doubting that some kind of next help will pass and so on, firstly, it's not needed right now. But secondly, 73%, it's just groundbreaking support. There is majority of support for Ukraine. We need to be very precise on that. Everything else is just media fluff, media speculation that just wants to play on your uncertainties, to install fear in you. US population has been for Ukraine, and the way that there was no help from US to Ukraine was because it was blocked. And now the new narrative is that it's now too much aid being sent to Ukraine. So I did some liberty. Here in the blue, all of this here, This is US GDP per year. This is how much stuff US essentially makes in turnover over a year. And then over here, you might see like a very, very thin line running through all of this. This thin line is an aid package that goes to Ukraine. However, the problem with that package is that 2/3 of that packages are staying within US. So it's actually what goes to Ukraine is actually just this part. So whenever someone says, "Oh my God, 60 billion, we sent so much money to Ukraine," the numbers doesn't matter. The proportions matter. And in proportion to the US GDP or even US yearly budget, if you don't want to go GDP, it's minuscule, it's non-existent, it's something that you don't even notice. It is that small of a difference, but it makes all of the difference in the world for Ukraine. Think about it this way. This is what US needs to spend to make sure Putin gets fucked. Now, tell me if it's worth it or not. And I hope you can shove this chart down the throat of anyone that tries to even, "Oh, but we sent so many billions to Ukraine. Oh my God, do we have to send next package as well?" It's like, next package. So it's like, I don't know, like it's like, imagine if you're buying a coffee and then like next month comes along and you're like, "Oh, do I have to buy another cup of coffee this month as well?" And then make a big deal out of it. That's the level. But there are also parties that don't have it as nice, and that is Russia. I made this nice post on my community feed today, where I kind of summarized what I've been reading a lot from different OSINT sources recently. And specifically, it was to deal with what is the situation with Russian production. How long Russia can go, because for a longer time it was a discussion that Russia can go for about 1.5 to 2 years with the current equipment, but then there was a situation that they're running low on certain equipment, and I was explaining there was a bottleneck, and I go in details. You can read this. I'm not going to go too much to repeat it, but the point is that a lot of what was counted before as proper units, some additional pictures are coming up of certain storage facilities and so on. And a lot of the things that are being stored on these facilities are looking pretty bad. They look that they are barely even like, a thing that can be used. And the internals components within these things have also rotted away, rusted and everything. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is rusted, but a lot of things is. And literally Russians need to take everything apart and almost rebuild it anew. So the value of using stockpile to rebuild is starting to diminish. Like, it requires more work to generate the same output. And because Russia is being crushed by the pressure of getting more men into the military, Russian production is struggling. Now, does that mean that there will not be forces for Russian at all? No. Russia still has a lot of forces on the front line. They're also accumulating forces for the frontline push right now, and we're going to come back to that later. But more importantly, Russia is definitely struggling with their production capacity. And these storage piles, potentially, they cannot hold really a better escalation. They're able to output something right now, and Ukraine is able to deal with the current output. But if Ukraine, or more precisely with the new aid package, when Ukraine gets new capabilities, when F-16s come into play, when long-range equipment, long-range capabilities come into play, the attrition rate for Russians will go up. And the problem with the production bottlenecks for Russia is, even if attrition rate goes up and your bottleneck doesn't really expand, and you cannot substitute that output, despite the fact that you might still have these dead husks with some relatively capable equipment in the storage facilities, you just don't have the turnout to be able to substitute the attrition rate. Now, we need to be very, very clear. Right now, the situation is still not changed. The aid package is not fully past the Senate yet. It will pass the Senate. So it's going to be still difficult times for Ukraine. There is an interview by Kirilo Budanov, the spy chief of Ukraine, on BBC. It's in Russian because it's by the Russian service of BBC. I'm going to leave the link in the description, but you can go and you can use auto translate. It's a nice interview. The core point of what he's stating, besides any other things that you can read, is that the Russians will be very active right now. May, June, Russians are preparing something really, really nasty in a lot of different areas, including on the front line. And we already see some of that being really, really problematic, most notably in the area of Avdiivka. Here, the village of Ocheretine is under attack, and there is an issue with that. I showed you topographic maps some time ago, and I explained that there is a nice defensive barrier that goes right over here. However, there is a weak point for that defensive barrier is Ocheretine, which is located on the hill that kind of overlooks everything, like, you know, down there. And Ukrainians must defend of Ocheretine. And while Ukrainians try to defend Ocheretine, it's clear that they just don't have the resources, and Russians are pushing pretty hard. And this is where basically we're now running on a timer, whether or not the help from US can come in time. The vote for the aid package from US will happen on Tuesday, and it's expected for Biden to sign it ASAP. Now, I have some very, very unconfirmed sources, and please don't quote me on this. This is like complete speculation. But some of the sources that I have, they're stating that the package will be about 9 billion large, and that actually majority of equipment within that package that will be delivered was already accumulated over time, and it was accumulated on our ally bases in Germany and Romania. So the basic thing is that the stuff that needs to be delivered to Ukraine ASAP is already in Europe, and it's not going to be shipped from US. It's just looking for the green light to get ready to go. Again, don't quote me on that. This is very unverified sources for me. This is more for me now testing if this source is true. So it's going to be a good discovery. And obviously all of the people is like, oh my God, he says 9 billion and then it's not going to be 9 billion. I was like, oh, let's quote him on that. Doesn't matter. Let's go for this. But Ukrainians are trying to do their best, and they're doing pretty good job. For example, just recently, Ukrainians did a huge strike in the Crimea area, and they hit the S-400, like it's a Russian analog of a Patriot missile system. So they hit the S-400, not that it's as good, but like just in a ballpark to think about this. So basically they hit the Russian Patriot system, which was the S-400, and they hit it in Crimea and destroyed a lot. And the more I looked at this picture, the thought for me is the dumber I get. Because supposedly what we see here is 1, 2, 3, 4 S-400 launchers, and then there is a radar installation. So those were all the the parts of the complex system that fires S-400 system. And it's like the longer I look at this image, the dumber I feel for Russians. Like we always knew that Russians were not smart, but it's now been 2 years into the war. Ukraine has fired countless missiles into Crimea, already destroying anti-air systems. And these freaking geniuses have found no better way than to have 4 launchers situated about 2-3 meters from each other in a line. The stupidity of Russians, every time I read about, oh my God, Russia is such a great country. Russia's never been beaten. Russia is like, you know, if we just like, Russia is like just gonna gather its strength, and then the real army of Russians are gonna, it's like, every time I look at something like this, like everything just crashes. It's like, no, Russia is a country full of morons. Absolute freaking morons. The only thing why they can do what they can do is that we fed them shitloads of resources that they are now using to kill Ukrainians. that they have stockpiles from the Soviet Unions that they can sustainably lose at a rate that no other military in the world can even closely approach to match. It's only because of that. They don't have the mental capacity or procedures or even understanding how to fight competently. And I know that people on the front line will disagree with me. And that's fair. When you're military, you should not always, you should never underestimate your enemy. And the prevalence of mass and resource availability for Russians is never making it easy for the fighters at the front line. And they do have some certain solutions. But when you zoom out and when you try to analyze, you just look at it as like, these men are idiots. It's like monkey with a grenade. That's literally what the modern Russia is. The sooner this freaking state is over and Russians get back to civilization, the safer I will feel because of the current situation with their weapons. I hope Ukraine destroys all of the Russian military potential so these morons will not threaten anyone ever again. But there is also great things to talk about. For example, Slovaks doing an incredible job. Slovakian government right now is hostile to Ukraine. Both the president and prime minister openly don't want to support Ukraine. They would fall within that minority that want to see Ukraine destroyed. But the Slovak people say it's like, that's not us. That's not us. We cannot stand by and do nothing while our government is such a piece of shit. So the Slovaks literally started crowdfunding for the ammunition for Ukrainians. And at the current tempo, they've already gathered more than $3 million for Ukraine. Absolute chance. Incredible job. Thank you, people of Slovakia. But we on this channel are also not standing by, and I know we're doing a great job. Our current fundraiser that we're running is to deliver the anti-drone guns. Super important. Drones are literal nightmare for the peoples at the front line. And right now we're working with Ukraine AidOps, respected, well-known volunteer organization that works directly with the people from the front lines. And they are getting the anti-drone weapons. And we are now almost halfway there to support this initiative. If you have some money to spare, if you want to support this channel, please step over it and rather donate money to Ukraine. If you didn't know, then I am not running this YouTube as my full-time job. This is just my secondary job. I have my day job, which I'm very happy about. I'm having a good career. I earn enough money to sustain myself, my wife, and so on. This YouTube and what it generates, this is specifically to deal with Ukraine stuff, and I'm trying to help Ukrainians with the profits from this channel. But this is the whole another thing. The point is, if you want to support this channel, I would appreciate it for sure. But before you donate to me, consider maybe donating to Ukrainian armed forces. And if you have some spares, then I will gladly take your money. Thanks for that in advance. I love you all, guys. Great news. Let's follow along. Slava Ukraini. Support the armed forces of Ukraine. Trust in the armed forces of Ukraine. And the victory will come. And I'll see you next time.